Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'm going to show you how I made these wafer paper ranunculus or ranunculuses. Anyway, here's the tutorial. Here's what we need for this project. Small scissors, a few brushes, some petal dust, and you can definitely choose any colors you want for this. For my project, I did choose lemon sherbet and parrot green, but you can certainly choose any pinks, purples, reds, whatever color you want your ranunculus to be. You will also need several hole punches of different sizes. In this case, I did choose 3 different sizes. I do have a 3/4 inch hole punch. I have a 1-inch hole punch, and then since I didn't have a 1 1/4 hole punch, I did go ahead and use this little floral tape kind of like circumference. You can also use circle cutters if you have them and just cut out the circles by hand. You can also use a Cricut to cut your circles, which is a lot faster and a lot easier than this, but this is what I have to work with. And finally, we will also need a little bit of water, and this water is just to make sure that we can stick our petals onto our little foam balls and onto one another. I did also forget to mention that you will need wafer paper. In this instance, I am using icingimages wafer paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start hole punching, and I'm really not counting the amount of circles that I'm using. Here, for the sake of the video, I just hole punched the whole line, but for example, to cover the little ball in the beginning, I did use 8 of the tiniest circles that I have. For this project, I am using tiny foam spheres, and the size that I am using is 1/2 inch. As you can see, there is 2 types of foam. There's a smooth foam and then there's a bumpy one. I did choose the bumpy one because it's a lot easier to work with this specific project, in my opinion. Now that we have our circles cut out, we will go ahead and cut a little slit into all of our little circles. Make sure that you don't go all the way through. This slit is so that we can apply a little bit of water and fold them into each other just slightly so that we can be able to mold this little petal onto our sphere. Once you have all your little petals assembled, you will start applying a little bit of water onto the petal and then just slightly pressing it onto your little sphere. Make sure that you press it on very, very firmly so that it can actually stick onto your foam ball. If you are having trouble with it sticking, you can also use a little bit of corn syrup or piping gel to make this a little bit easier for you to work with. And basically what we're going to do is we are going to try to cover the little sphere with our petals. And you'll just keep repeating this all the way through, and we will do 2 layers of this specific step. Once you are done covering the small sphere, we will move on to the slightly larger petals, and we will do the same thing that we did with the small petals. Cut a little slit into the petals and then just kind of connect them a little bit by applying a little bit of water on the edges. Make sure that you don't close them completely, but you're just slightly covering them onto each other so that it's easier for you to place them onto the little sphere. For these steps, make sure that your petals are slightly raised to the top. So here what I am doing is I'm making sure that the bottom of the petals is sticking onto the sphere and that the top is raised up a little bit. We don't want it to stick onto the ball from the top like we did with the first layer, because this is going to add the volume that our flower needs. For this part, I did add 2 layers of the 1-inch petals that I did make. So depending on what your middle size of petal is, you will go ahead and add 2 layers. And this is just simply so we can add volume. It also depends on how big you want your flower to be, how wide, how open. So just kind of use it as your guideline, but definitely customize it to your liking. And then just repeat the same thing with the larger petals. For the larger petals in this case, I did only use 1 layer of the petals. I did make my flower smaller than the one that I have here for display. And then as soon as we finish this, we will move on to the painting. Also, make sure as you are moving along that your petals are touching each other. So just apply a little bit of water and place them onto each other to make sure that they're not flying around. To apply my lighter color, I always like to use a fluffy little brush, and then just once you dip, make sure you tap out the excess. As you can see, this lemon sherbet that I chose goes on very, very light, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm just gonna go ahead and dab it onto my flower, and then with a slightly tighter, smaller brush, I will apply my brighter, darker color. So you'll just follow this with whatever colors you chose, and at the end you'll get a little bit of a faded soft flower, but feel free to also add more color to your flowers. At the end, you should get something that looks a little bit like this. Definitely feel free to experiment. I hope that this video was a little bit helpful, and don't forget to post your questions or comments down in the comment box below. And all the information that you need is in the description box. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!